The air recyclers on Xyler Station hummed with a peculiar organic timbre that set Alex's teeth on edge. 3 days on this biotechnological nightmare of a space station, and he still couldn't shake the feeling that he was inside the belly of some massive, living creature rather than a proper space installation. The corridors seemed to pulse slightly as he walked, the bioluminescent fungi that served as lighting responding to his movement with gentle fluctuations of bluish-green glow. Just fix the tertiary communication node and get out, Alex muttered to himself, adjusting the tool belt around his waist. A simple repair job, barely worth sending a junior tech for, let alone someone with my experience. His supervisor back at Earth Central Command had called it a diplomatic opportunity, which Alex recognized as management speak for someone else refused this assignment. Now here he was, a mid-level maintenance technician with 8 years of experience in the most cutting-edge human tech, reduced to playing handyman on an alien station because nobody wanted to deal with the Zaltaran and their unsettling organic technology. A cleaning drone, if you could call the cricket-sized, six-legged creature a drone, scuttled across his path, pausing to wave its antennae in his direction before continuing on its way. Alex suppressed a shudder. The Zaltran approach to technology melded biological systems with mechanical components in ways that human science was still struggling to understand, let alone replicate. It was brilliant, revolutionary, and absolutely revolting to Alex's sensibilities. The station itself was a marvel of interspecies cooperation and trade, hosting over 30 different sentient species at any given time. Its central hub buzzed with activity. Merchants hawking wares from across 3 sectors, diplomats engaged in hushed negotiations, and tourists gawking at the exotic sights and sounds. Alex had avoided the busier sections since his arrival, sticking to the maintenance tunnels and service corridors where he could at least pretend he was on a normal station. Third junction passed the amber membrane, then left at the respiratory filter garden. Alex read from his tablet, squinting at the station map. The Zaltaran didn't believe in straight lines or conventional navigation. Their architectural philosophy favored organic curves, asymmetrical spaces, and landmarks that occasionally moved of their own accord. He rounded a bend in the corridor and came face-to-face with a shimmering, translucent barrier, the amber membrane mentioned in his directions. Unlike the solid airlocks Alex was accustomed to, this was a permeable boundary that somehow recognized authorized personnel and allowed them passage while maintaining atmospheric integrity. Alex hesitated before pushing through, grimacing at the warm, gelatinous resistance against his skin before the membrane parted and allowed him through. Disgusting, he muttered, wiping his hands on his uniform pants. Give me a good old-fashioned metal door any day. The respiratory filter garden turned out to be exactly what it sounded like. A chamber filled with various plants, each with uniquely shaped leaves that undulated softly, drawing in air and expelling it through tiny pores. The effect created a gentle breeze that carried the scent of something akin to mint and cinnamon. It was, Alex had to admit, more pleasant than the recycled air on human stations, but the constant movement of the vegetation made him dizzy. He was so focused on finding the correct turn that he nearly walked straight into her. She stood in a small alcove formed by arching plants, her slender fingers gently stroking what appeared to be a potted sapling whose leaves changed color at her touch. At first glance, she was unmistakably humanoid. 2 arms, 2 legs, a torso, and a head with facial features in roughly the right places. But there, all similarity to humans ended. Her skin was a pale lavender hue, with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and flow beneath the surface, occasional pulses of soft light tracing delicate lines across her exposed arms and neck. But it was her hair that truly caught Alex's attention, if hair was even the correct term. From her scalp grew what looked like dozens of slender, silver-white tendrils that resembled fine roots or filaments. They moved with subtle autonomy, some floating weightlessly around her head, while others braided themselves into more controlled formations. They captured and reflected the bioluminescent light around them, creating an ethereal, shimmering halo effect. Her eyes turned toward him, multifaceted like those of an insect, but larger, with irises that shimmered between deep purple and electric blue. Those eyes widened slightly at the sight of him, a stranger clearly out of place in this secluded garden. Alex froze, suddenly aware he had intruded on what seemed to be a private moment. The polite thing would be to apologize, ask for directions to the communication node, and be on his way. That's what he intended to do. What came out instead was, "Wow, you have great hair." The words hung in the air between them, and Alex immediately wanted to sink through the floor. Of all the inane, inappropriate things to say to a member of an advanced alien species whose culture and customs he knew virtually nothing about. But it was her reaction that truly stunned him. The Zaltaran woman went completely still, her eyes widening to an almost impossible degree. The patterns beneath her skin suddenly flared with brilliant light, pulsing in rapid, concentric waves from her chest outward to her fingertips. The filament-like hair stood on end, each strand straightening and beginning to emit a soft, ringing tone that harmonized into an eerie melody. Around them, the plants in the garden responded in kind. Flowers that had been closed tight suddenly bloomed, releasing puffs of luminescent pollen. The leaves of nearby shrubs turned simultaneously toward Alex, as if he had become the sun in their private ecosystem. I'm sorry, Alex stammered, taking a step back. I didn't mean to. Whatever I just did, I apologize. Before he could finish, four Zaltaran guards materialized from seemingly nowhere. They wore armor that appeared to be grown rather than manufactured, with living components that pulsed in sync with their movements. They carried no visible weapons, but the authority in their stance was unmistakable. They formed a loose circle around Alex and the woman, their expressions impossible to read, but their body language tense and alert. One of them spoke in the musical, tonally complex language of the Zaltaran. The woman responded, her voice tremulous, the luminescence beneath her skin still pulsing erratically. "Please," Alex said, raising his hands in a universal gesture of surrender. "There's been a misunderstanding. I'm just a maintenance technician, here to fix a communication node. I didn't mean any offense." The guards exchanged glances. Then the apparent leader addressed Alex in accented but clear English. "You will come with us," he said, his tone formal but not threatening. "Both of you." "Both." Alex glanced at the woman, who was now looking at him with an expression that mingled shock, curiosity, and something that unsettlingly resembled resignation. "Look, whatever I did, she had nothing to do with it. This is my fault. That is not for us to decide," the guard replied. "Please follow." As they were escorted through corridors Alex hadn't seen on any station map, he tried several times to apologize to the woman walking silently beside him. She acknowledged him with brief glances, but offered no response. The luminescent patterns beneath her skin had dimmed to a soft glow, and her hair tendrils had settled into a more subdued arrangement, though they still occasionally twitched in what seemed to be agitation. "My name is Alex," he tried again. "I really am sorry about whatever this is. I swear I didn't mean to cause trouble." "Lyra," she finally replied, her voice carrying a musical quality unlike any human speech. "And you do not understand what you have done." Before Alex could ask for clarification, they arrived at their destination, a circular chamber whose walls appeared to be comprised entirely of living tissue. Translucent membranes separated various areas, and floating globes of bioluminescence provided gentle illumination. The chamber was clearly some sort of official space, with several older Zaltarans seated in a semicircle around what resembled a pool of shimmering liquid. One of them, distinguished by elaborately patterned robes and hair tendrils that reached nearly to the floor, rose as they entered. The patterns beneath this elder's skin pulsed with deliberate, controlled rhythms. "I am Elder Thaxos," he said in flawless English, "Chief Biological Harmonizer of Xylar Station and Cultural Liaison to non-Zaltaran visitors. I understand we have an unusual situation." "Elder," Alex began, "I apologize for any cultural misunderstanding. I meant no disrespect to—" Thaxos raised a hand. "Please, Technician Alex Chun. The situation requires proper context before we proceed." "Vexer," Would you explain to our guest what has transpired? A younger Zaltarin stepped forward, holding what appeared to be a living tablet, a flat, rectangular organism with a surface that shifted between various displays as he stroked it. Human visitors to Zaltarin spaces are provided with basic cultural guidelines. Vexer began, his tone mildly accusatory. Did you not review the material sent to you prior to your arrival? Alex felt heat rising to his face. The truth was, he had skimmed the cultural briefing, focusing only on the technical specifications relevant to his repair job and ignoring what he had dismissed as diplomatic fluff. I may have missed some details, he admitted. Vexer sighed, a sound like wind through chimes. What you have done, inadvertently or not, is to initiate the biological harmony oath with Lyra Kavarin, botanical geneticist and member of a highly respected Zaltarin lineage. The what now? Alex looked between Vexer and Lyra, who had taken a seat at the edge of the council's semicircle, her gaze fixed on the shimmering pool. In our culture, Vexer continued, complementing specific physical attributes directly linked to one's biological essence, such as the neural filaments you referred to as hair, while a space of biological significance, such as a respiratory garden, constitutes a formal proposal of biological synchronization. Alex blinked. You mean like marriage? Several of the elders made a sound that might have been laughter, though it reminded Alex more of leaves rustling in a breeze. No, human marriage is a social and sometimes religious contract, Faxos explained. Biological synchronization is far more profound, a literal merging of bioenergetic fields, creating a symbiotic relationship at the cellular level. It is exceedingly rare, even among our own kind, typically occurring only between individuals who have shared intense experiences or demonstrated exceptional biological compatibility. And I proposed this? By complimenting her hair. Alex felt like he might be the victim of an elaborate prank, but the gravity with which everyone in the chamber regarded him suggested otherwise. When you voiced your admiration for Lyra's neural filaments, which are in fact sensitive organs that process environmental data and facilitate biological connections, while standing in a sacred growth space, you initiated the first resonance, Faxos said. And when Lyra's body responded with the illumination of acceptance, the initial bonding began. Wait, she accepted? Alex turned to Lyra, who finally met his gaze. It was not intentional, she said, her voice soft. The illumination is an involuntary physiological response to a compatible bioenergetic field. It is rare for a non-Zaltarin to trigger such a response. So this was all a mistake, Alex said with relief. A cultural misunderstanding. We could just call it off, right? The silence that followed was answer enough. The initial binding has already manifested, Vexer finally said, approaching Alex with his living tablet. Observe. The surface of the tablet shifted to show a magnified image of what Alex recognized as human skin cells, his own, presumably. As they watched, the cells pulsed with a faint but unmistakable pattern of light, similar to the luminescence he had observed beneath Lyra's skin. This is inside me, Alex asked, feeling suddenly lightheaded. The resonance has already begun altering your cellular structure at a quantum level, Faxos confirmed. And similar changes are occurring within Lyra's biology. Can it be reversed? Alex asked, fighting to keep his voice steady. Theoretically, yes, Faxos replied. But the desynchronization ritual is complex, resource-intensive, and not without risk to both participants. It has been performed successfully only a handful of times in our recorded history. And if we don't reverse it, then you and Lyra will continue to experience increasing levels of bioenergetic synchronization, Vexer explained. You will develop sensory connections, shared emotional states, possibly even limited thought transference. Your bodies will adapt to accommodate the bond. Though being different species, the manifestations may be unpredictable. Alex ran a hand through his hair, his ordinary, non-sentient human hair, and tried to process what he was hearing. Through a single careless comment, he had apparently initiated some kind of profound biological bond with an alien woman he had just met, altering his very cellular structure in the process. This is insane, he murmured. It is unexpected, Thaxos corrected. But now that it has begun, we must proceed with appropriate protocols. Until a decision regarding possible desynchronization is reached, you and Lyra must remain in proximity to stabilize the initial bond. Separate quarters have been prepared adjacent to one another in the diplomatic residence section. For how long? Alex asked, already mentally composing the message to his supervisor that would surely end his career. The initial stabilization typically requires a minimum of 1 full lunar cycle, Thaxos replied. Approximately 28 of your Earth days. 28, Alex sputtered. My assignment here was supposed to last 3 days. We have already contacted your superiors at Earth Central Command to explain the situation, Vexer said. They have agreed to the temporary reassignment. Alex could just imagine that conversation. He would never live this down, assuming he even had a job to return to after this debacle. Do I have any say in this at all? He asked, aware of the petulance in his voice, but past caring. Of course, Thaxos said, sounding genuinely surprised at the question. The Harmony Oath is ultimately a matter of choice for both participants. However, the physical consequences of an unstabilized initial bond could be severe. We merely suggest following the traditional protocols while you both consider your options. Alex looked at Lyra, who had remained largely silent throughout the explanation. And what do you think about all this? Her multifaceted eyes studied him for a long moment before she answered. I think, Technician Alex, that we have much to learn about one another. It wasn't exactly an answer, but the subtle pulse of light beneath her skin as she spoke told Alex that whatever was happening between them, it was far from over. The residential quarters assigned to Alex and Lyra were located in a quiet section of the station reserved for diplomatic visitors. Though adjacent, they were separate spaces, each designed to accommodate the physiological needs of their respective occupants. Alex's quarters were a compromise between human comfort and Zaltaran design sensibilities. The walls were the same living tissue that comprised most of the station, but they had been coaxed into forming more rectilinear shapes than the curved, asymmetrical spaces the Zaltaran preferred. The furniture was mostly synthetic material that wouldn't have looked out of place in a high-end Earth apartment, though the bed featured what appeared to be a semi-sentient mattress that adjusted its firmness in response to his body's pressure points. Lyra's quarters, glimpsed briefly as they were shown to their rooms, were far more alien. A space that seemed more like a terrarium than living quarters, with various plants growing from the walls and ceiling, creating natural partitions and furniture. The lighting came entirely from bioluminescent organisms that responded to her presence, brightening or dimming according to some unspoken communication. After the guards and administrators left them to settle in, an awkward silence fell between them. They stood in the corridor between their assigned quarters, neither quite ready to retreat to their separate spaces, but unsure how to proceed with their bizarre new relationship. So, Alex finally said, I guess we're, what, roommates now? Biological pen pals. The tendrils of Lyra's hair shifted in what might have been amusement. The term in our language would translate roughly to resonance partners, though that fails to capture the full complexity. Right? Alex sighed. Listen, I really am sorry about all this. If I'd known a simple compliment would trigger a biological bond, I would have kept my mouth shut. It was not merely the words, Lyra clarified. It was the specific combination of factors, your presence in a sacred growth space, the particular neural filaments you admired, which are connected to my genetic lineage, and most importantly, the unexpected compatibility of our bioenergetic fields. So, it's like biological bad luck. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong compliment. Lyra tilted her head, the movement causing her filaments to catch the light in an admittedly mesmerizing display. Or perhaps the opposite. The Harmony Oath is considered a great blessing among my people, a rare and sacred connection between members of the same species who actually know each other, Alex pointed out. Not random humans who blunder into gardens and make inappropriate comments. True, she acknowledged. This situation is unprecedented. Another silence fell between them, less awkward but weighted with uncertainty. I should report to my supervisor, Alex finally said. Let him know I'm going to be delayed. And I still need to fix that communication node, bond or no bond. We are permitted to move about the station so long as we remain within approximately 50 meters of each other, Lyra said. I can accompany you to your work site tomorrow. Perhaps observing your technical skills will provide insight into why our fields prove compatible. The way she said it, clinical, analytical, reminded Alex that to her, this was as much a scientific curiosity as a personal inconvenience. She was, after all, a botanical geneticist, a scientist in her own right. Sure, he agreed. And maybe you can explain more about this bond thing. If we're stuck with each other for the next month, I should at least understand what's happening to me. Lyra nodded, the movement causing a subtle wave of light to pulse beneath her skin. A reasonable approach. Until tomorrow, then, Technician Alex. Just Alex is fine, he said. If we're going to be biologically bonded, we might as well be on a first-name basis. That earned him what he thought might be a smile, a slight parting of her lips to reveal teeth that resembled polished opals. Very well, just Alex, she replied, and he was almost certain she was teasing him. Until tomorrow. As they retreated to their separate quarters, Alex felt a strange tingling sensation at the base of his skull, a warmth that spread down his spine before fading. He wondered if it was his imagination or the first tangible sign of the bond Thaxos had described. Either way, his simple repair assignment had just become the most complicated mission of his career. The first week of their forced proximity was a study in cultural misunderstandings and gradual adaptations. Each morning, they would meet in the small shared atrium between their quarters to plan the day's activities, a process that often resulted in compromises neither was entirely satisfied with. Alex's work on the communication node, the original purpose for his presence on the station, took only a few hours to complete once he actually reached the site. But his superiors, upon learning of the diplomatic incident, as they were now calling it, had assigned him an expanded list of maintenance tasks throughout the station, essentially making him the on-site human technician for the foreseeable future. Lyra, meanwhile, had her own responsibilities as a botanical geneticist, working on hybridization projects that aimed to create plant species capable of surviving in various harsh environments. Her work took place in laboratories filled with experimental flora that reacted to human presence in unsettling ways, reaching toward Alex with tendril-like appendages or emitting strange odors when he came too close. They censored different biochemistry. Lyra explained after one particularly aggressive vine had attempted to wrap itself around Alex's wrist. They are curious, not hostile. Tell that to the carnivorous fern that tried to eat my multitool yesterday, Alex muttered, maintaining a safe distance from the experimental plots. Their work schedules required careful coordination, as they could not stray too far from one another without experiencing increasing discomfort, a dull pressure in the chest that grew more acute the longer they were separated. By mutual agreement, they attempted to maintain a distance of no more than 30 meters, less than the 50-meter maximum that had been suggested, but enough to give each other space to work. The most challenging adjustment, however, came during meals. Zaltaran dietary requirements differed significantly from human needs, and the station's food synthesis systems struggled to produce fare that satisfied both. Lyra's diet consisted primarily of nutrient broths derived from various plant species, liquids that moved of their own accord in the bowl and emitted soft humming sounds that made Alex lose his appetite. His own meals, protein-rich, synthesized approximations of earth foods, clearly disgusted Lyra, who would turn her multifaceted eyes away when he ate and whose skin patterns would shift to muted grays and browns that he soon recognized as indicators of discomfort or revulsion. After 3 days of awkward, silent meals taken on opposite sides of the dining area, Alex proposed a solution. Let's try each other's food, he suggested. Not as a regular thing, but just to understand. Maybe that will help with the bonding thing. Lyra's hair tendrils curled inward, a gesture he had come to recognize as skepticism. Our digestive systems are not compatible. Certain compounds in my nutrition could be toxic to you. I'm not talking about a full meal, Alex clarified. Just a taste. And we can check with the medical staff first. Make sure it won't poison either of us. To his surprise, she agreed, And that evening, under the supervision of a Zaltran medical technician and with enzymatic neutralizers ready if needed, they cautiously sampled each other's cuisine. Lyra's nutrient broth tasted to Alex like a combination of spinach, cinnamon, and something indefinably alien. Not entirely unpleasant, but certainly not something he would choose to consume regularly. Lyra's reaction to a spoonful of his synthesized pasta was more dramatic. Her eyes widened, the patterns beneath her skin pulsed rapidly, and her hair tendrils stood straight up before relaxing. The sensory experience is intense, she said after carefully swallowing. So many different compounds, competing for attention. How do you process such complexity with every meal? I could ask you the same about your music, Alex countered, referring to the ambient tonal arrangements that played in Zaltran common areas, compositions with such intricate harmonics that they gave him a headache after a few minutes. It was the first of many such exchanges, awkward, sometimes uncomfortable attempts to bridge the vast differences between their species and cultures. They experimented with forms of recreation. Alex introduced Lyra to simple card games. She taught him a Zaltran meditation technique that involves synchronizing one's breathing with the pulsation of bioluminescent fungi. Communication styles, Lyra struggled with human idioms. Alex couldn't reproduce the subtle light patterns that accompanied Zaltran speech, and personal space boundaries, a concept that had very different meanings in their respective cultures. Through it all, the biological bond between them continued to develop. By the end of the first week, Alex could sometimes sense Lyra's emotional state even when she wasn't in the same room, a faint echo of her feelings that manifested as subtle sensations in his own body. Excitement registered as a tingling along his spine, concentration as a warmth behind his eyes, displeasure as a tightness in his chest. Lyra reported similar experiences, though her descriptions were often couched in biological terms that Alex only partially understood. She spoke of harmonic resonances and quantum entanglement at the cellular level, scientific concepts that barely captured the strange intimacy of their connection. More visible were the physical changes. The patterns of light that had always existed beneath Lyra's skin began to appear on Alex as well. Subtle at first, visible only in dim lighting, but gradually becoming more pronounced. They followed the paths of his veins and arteries, pulsing with his heartbeat in patterns that matched Lyra's own bioluminescence. Meanwhile, Lyra's neural filaments, her hair, began to display greater responsiveness to Alex's presence, orienting toward him when he entered a room even before she consciously noticed his arrival. And on 2 occasions, they shared dreams, strange, symbolic landscapes that combined elements of Earth and Zaltran imagery into surreal panoramas they could both recall with perfect clarity upon waking. It was during one such shared dream, 10 days into their bond, that they encountered the first real test of their developing connection. In the dream, they stood together on what appeared to be a Zaltran ship, its corridors formed from living tissue, similar to the station. But something was wrong. The tissue was darkening, withering, the bioluminescence failing section by section. Dream Lyra turned to Dream Alex with an expression of panic, trying to tell him something important, but no sound emerged from her mouth. Instead, the ship itself seemed to scream, a high-pitched keening that jolted them both awake simultaneously in their separate quarters. Alex was on his feet and halfway to the door before he was fully conscious, driven by an overwhelming urge to reach Lyra. He found her in the shared atrium, her skin patterns pulsing with agitation, her neural filaments writhing like disturbed serpents. "You felt it too," she said. "It wasn't a question. The ship, the dying ship," Alex confirmed. "What was that?" "Just a nightmare." Lyra's multifaceted eyes focused on something distant. "Perhaps, or perhaps something more. Our bond has progressed faster than the elders anticipated. It may be developing capabilities they did not predict." Before Alex could ask what she meant, an alarm sounded throughout the station. Not the harsh, mechanical wail of human emergency systems, but a pulsing, organic tone that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. "What is that?" Alex asked, feeling a surge of adrenaline. Lyra's skin patterns shifted to a deep, urgent purple. A biohazard alert. Something is wrong with the station's living systems. The dream, it seemed, had been a warning. Word spread quickly through the station's communication channels. A previously unknown pathogen had been detected in the central bioreactor, the massive, heart-like organ that processed waste and generated fresh oxygen for the entire station. Initial reports suggested the pathogen was attacking the specialized bacteria that made the reactor function, breaking down complex waste compounds into usable nutrients and breathable air. The Zaltern biological engineers were working frantically to isolate and neutralize the pathogen, but their efforts were hampered by its unusual structure, a hybrid form that combined elements of both organic and synthetic origin. Some whispered of sabotage, pointing to recent tensions with a rival trading consortium that had been denied access to Zaltern biotechnology patents. For the first 48 hours, life on the station continued with minimal disruption. The bioreactor had redundant systems that compensated for the initial damage. But by the third day, the effects became impossible to ignore. The ambient temperature dropped as energy was diverted to critical systems. The bioluminescent lighting dimmed, forcing the activation of backup mechanical lights that cast harsh, unfamiliar shadows. And most concerning, the air began to develop a subtle but unmistakable sour note, the first sign of failures in the oxygen recycling process. Emergency protocols were implemented. Non-essential personnel were evacuated to ships docked at the station or transferred to the small fleet of lifeboats kept in reserve. Essential staff, including the biological engineering team, station security, and critical maintenance personnel, remained on board to combat the spreading infection. Alex, as the station's only human technician, was deemed essential, particularly as the crisis began to affect mechanical systems that interfaced with the station's biological components. Lyra, with her expertise in botanical genetics, was reassigned from her research projects to assist the team working on a countermeasure to the pathogen. Their bond, which had been an inconvenience during normal operations, now became a complication in crisis management. The 50-meter proximity requirement limited their ability to respond to problems in different sections of the station. After several frustrating attempts to coordinate their movements through crowded emergency response corridors, Elder Thaxos called them both to a hastily convened meeting in what remained of the council chamber. "The situation has become critical," the elder told them without preamble. His normally immaculate appearance had deteriorated, his robes rumpled and his neural filaments dull and limp. "Our conventional approaches have failed to contain the pathogen. It appears to have been engineered specifically to resist our biological countermeasures." "Definitely sabotage, then," Alex said. Thaxos nodded gravely. "It would appear so, but that is a matter for another time. What concerns us now is survival. The bioreactor will fail completely within 24 hours if we cannot stop the progression of the infection. I've been monitoring the mechanical backups," Alex reported. "They can maintain life support for essential personnel for about 3 days, but they're not designed for long-term operation. We need the bioreactor." "Precisely," Thaxos agreed. "Which brings me to the purpose of this meeting. Our Science Council has been reviewing all available data on the pathogen, seeking any vulnerability that might be exploited. They have made an unexpected discovery." The elder activated a holographic display that hovered in the air between them. It showed 2 cellular structures side by side, one with the distinctive patterns of Zaltern biology, the other unmistakably human. "These are samples from you and Lyra," Thaxos explained. "Specifically, cells that have been affected by your biological bond. Observe what happens when they are exposed to the pathogen." The display shifted to show the introduction of a third element, a dark, spiky structure that Alex assumed represented the pathogen. When it contacted the Zalteran cell, the cell's luminescence dimmed rapidly, its internal structures breaking down. But when the pathogen contacted the human cell, something different occurred. The cell's structure remained intact, and after a brief period, the pathogen itself began to deteriorate. "The human immune response?" Alex asked. "Not exactly," Thaxos said. "Your natural immune system would have some resistance, yes, but not this level of effectiveness. What you're seeing is the result of the bond between you and Lyra. The hybridized cellular structure that has developed in both of you appears to create a bioenergetic frequency that disrupts the pathogen's molecular cohesion. You're saying our biological bond is toxic to the pathogen? Lyra asked, her voice betraying her surprise. Precisely, Thaxos confirmed, which presents a possible solution to our crisis. He gestured, and the display changed again, showing a schematic of the station with the bioreactor highlighted at its center. If you were both to enter the bioreactor chamber and fully activate your bond, bringing it to complete synchronization, the resulting bioenergetic pulse could neutralize the pathogen throughout the system. Fully activate? Alex repeated. What does that mean exactly? Thaxos and Lyra exchanged a look that made Alex instantly uneasy. The Harmony Oath proceeds through stages, Lyra explained. We have experienced the initial resonance and early synchronization, but full activation requires a deliberate merging of bioenergetic fields, a process typically accompanied by a specific ritual and usually occurring only after months or years of gradual bonding. But we've only been bonded for 2 weeks, Alex protested, which is why this approach carries significant risk, Thaxos admitted. Accelerating the bond could result in unpredictable physiological effects for both of you. There is a reason the traditional process unfolds slowly. What kind of unpredictable effects are we talking about? Alex asked, alarmed. Best case scenario, temporary discomfort and accelerated physical transformations that would otherwise occur gradually, Thaxos said. Worst case, permanent biological alterations or potentially fatal bioenergetic feedback. Fatal, Alex repeated flatly. You're asking us to risk our lives. I am presenting an option, Thaxos corrected gently. One of very few remaining to us. If the bioreactor fails completely, the loss of life will be substantial, even with evacuation procedures in place. Alex looked at Lyra, searching her alien. Features for clues to her thoughts. The patterns beneath her skin pulsed in complex sequences that he was only beginning to learn to read, but he could feel her emotional state through their bond, a mixture of fear, determination, and something deeper that he couldn't quite identify. There must be another way, he said, something that doesn't involve potentially fatal biological merging. We continue to pursue all possibilities, Thaxos assured him, but time is running short, and your bond represents a unique resource that could save thousands of lives. I need to think about this, Alex said, rising from his seat. We need to think about this. Thaxos nodded. Of course, but please understand that we have less than 20 hours before catastrophic failure becomes inevitable. As they left the council chamber, Alex felt a familiar pressure behind his eyes, Lyra's concern bleeding through their bond. They walked in silence back to their quarters, each lost in thought, the weight of Thaxos's request hanging between them. It was only when they reached the shared atrium that Alex finally spoke. This is insane, he said. 2 weeks ago, I was just here to fix a communication node. Now I'm being asked to perform some kind of alien mind meld that might kill us both. It is not a mind meld, Lyra corrected. It is a synchronization of biological energy at the quantum level, affecting cellular structure and molecular. Not the point, Alex interrupted, running a hand through his hair in frustration. Whatever you call it, they're asking us to risk our lives to save the station. Lyra's neural filaments shifted in what Alex had come to recognize as her equivalent of a sigh. Yes, they are. And you're considering it, he said, not a question but an observation. He could feel her resolve through their connection, a steady warmth like banked coals. I am, she confirmed. This station is my home, Alex. And the pathogen threatening, it was likely engineered specifically to target my people's biology. If our unexpected bond offers a solution, I cannot ignore that possibility. Alex paced the small atrium, his thoughts racing. But full synchronization, you said that normally takes months, years. We barely know each other. And yet our bond has progressed more rapidly than any in recorded Zaltaran history, Lyra pointed out. The compatibility between us is extraordinary. The elders believe this is why the acceleration might be possible without fatal consequences. Might be isn't exactly reassuring, Alex muttered. No, Lyra agreed softly. It is not. Alex stopped pacing and turned to face her directly. In the dimmed lighting of the energy-conserving station, the patterns beneath her skin seemed more prominent, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. He realized he could feel that rhythm echoing in his own chest, a second heartbeat alongside his own. What happens if we survive this? He asked. If we fully synchronize, can it be reversed later? Or are we talking about a permanent change? The desynchronization ritual would still be an option, Lyra said, though something in her tone suggested uncertainty. Though after full activation, the process would be more complex. More dangerous, you mean? She didn't deny it. Yes, more dangerous. They fell silent, the only sound the subtle, organic hum of the station around them. A sound that had seemed alien and unsettling to Alex when he arrived, but now felt almost comforting in its familiarity. I need some time, he finally said. Not that we have much, but I need to think. Of course, Lyra agreed. I, too, must consider carefully. This is not a decision to be made lightly. They retreated to their separate quarters, but Alex found it impossible to sleep. The station's condition continued to deteriorate around them. The temperature dropped further as more systems failed, and the air took on an increasingly acrid quality that made his throat burn. Twice during the night, emergency repair teams rushed past his door, their urgent communications in Zaltaran too rapid for him to translate, but their tone unmistakably grim. In the early hours of the morning, a gentle illumination in his darkened room roused Alex from his fitful dozing. The patterns that had developed beneath his own skin in response to the bond were glowing more brightly than ever before, tracing lines of blue-white light along his arms and chest. As he watched, they shifted in a distinctive sequence that he somehow knew was not random. Drawn by an impulse he couldn't explain, he rose and moved to the door separating his quarters from the shared atrium. It opened before he could touch the control panel, revealing Lyra standing in the center of the small space, her own bioluminescence pulsing in patterns that matched his exactly. You feel it, she said simply. The station, Alex nodded, surprised at his own certainty. It's dying faster than they predicted. He didn't know how he knew this, only that the knowledge had settled into his mind with absolute clarity. Through their bond, he could sense the failing systems of the station as if they were extensions of his own body. The labored processing of the bioreactor, the struggling circulation of nutrients and oxygen, the fading luminescence of the living walls. We're out of time, Lyra said, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the glow of their shared bioluminescence. The engineers have tried everything within their capability. The pathogen adapts too quickly to their countermeasures. Alex took a deep breath of the increasingly stale air. So, it's either try this synchronization thing or watch the station die. Yes, Lyra confirmed, though there's one other factor to consider. She hesitated, her neural filaments curling inward in what Alex now recognized as an expression of uncertainty or discomfort. What is it? He prompted. The elders did not wish to add pressure to your decision, she began carefully, but there's a possibility that if the bioreactor fails completely, the resulting cascade of biological system failures could trigger a chain reaction in the station's power core. The potential exists for a catastrophic explosion that would affect not only this station, but nearby vessels, including the evacuation ships. Alex realized with growing horror. They're still in range, aren't they? Lyra nodded solemnly. Minimum safe distance for full evacuation would require more time than we now have. The weight of the situation settled over Alex like a physical burden. This wasn't just about saving the station anymore. It was about preventing a disaster that could claim thousands of lives. Lives that now hung in the balance of a decision he and Lyra had to make. I'm not a hero, he said quietly. I'm just a maintenance technician who said the wrong thing to the wrong person at the wrong time. And I am merely a botanical geneticist who responded to that wrong thing in an unexpected way, Lyra replied, a hint of what might have been humor coloring her musical voice. Yet here we stand, with the capacity to save many lives. Alex studied her alien features, now so much more familiar than they had been 2 weeks ago. Through their bond, he could sense her fear, not just for herself or the station, but for him. She was worried about what the accelerated synchronization might do to his human physiology, concerned that it might harm him more than her. The realization was strangely touching. "I'm scared," he admitted. "As am I," she replied, and the simple honesty of her response somehow made his fear easier to bear. "Then I guess we're doing this together," Alex said, surprised at the steadiness in his voice. Synchronized, as it were. The ghost of a smile appeared on Lyra's opalescent lips. It would appear so. They reported their decision to Elder Thaxos, who received the news with solemn gratitude. Preparations were made immediately, with the few remaining biological engineers and medical personnel converging on the central bioreactor chamber to prepare for the unprecedented procedure. "The process will require physical contact," the lead engineer explained as they were escorted through increasingly deteriorated corridors toward the heart of the station. "Specifically, contact that bridges your primary neural connection points. For a Zalteran, this would be the neural filaments and the primary thoracic junction." "And for a human?" Alex asked. "Your nervous system is more centralized," the engineer replied. "The spinal column and cerebral cortex. Based on our analysis of your developing bond, the optimal contact would be between Lyra's neural filaments and the base of your skull, and between your hands and her thoracic junction." Alex glanced at Lyra. "So, basically, I put my hands on her chest, and she puts her hair on the back of my neck? That doesn't sound too complicated." The engineer made a sound that might have been a chuckle. "The physical positioning is straightforward. The challenge lies in the synchronization itself. You must both consciously open your bioenergetic fields to one another, a process that typically requires extensive preparation and training." "But we haven't had extensive preparation or training," Alex pointed out. "No," the engineer acknowledged, "which is why Elder Thaxos will guide you through an accelerated meditation technique to facilitate the process. It will not be easy, but your existing bond should provide a foundation." They arrived at the bioreactor chamber, a massive cathedral-like space dominated by what appeared to be an enormous, pulsating organ. In healthier times, Alex imagined it would have glowed with vibrant bioluminescence, its tissues rhythmically processing the station's atmosphere in a beautiful display of biological engineering. Now, large sections had darkened to a sickly gray, and its pulsations were erratic and labored. A platform had been constructed at the center of the chamber, positioned directly beneath what the engineer identified as the bioreactor's primary neural cluster, a dense mass of tissue that coordinated the organ's functions and connected to the station's wider biological systems. Elder Thaxos waited for them there, along with a small team of medical personnel monitoring equipment that had been hastily assembled around the platform. "The time has come," Thaxos said as they approached. "Are you both resolving your decision?" Alex and Lyra exchanged a glance, and Alex was surprised to find that he could sense her answer before she spoke it, a calm certainty that resonated through their bond. "We are," they said in unison, and the synchronicity of their response seemed fitting given what they were about to attempt. "Then we shall begin," Thaxos said, gesturing for them to take their positions on the platform. They stood facing each other, close enough that Alex could see every facet of Lyra's extraordinary eyes, every subtle shift of the patterns beneath her skin. The neural filaments of her hair moved with gentle autonomy, occasionally reaching toward him before retreating, as if testing the air between them. "First, establish physical contact as instructed," Thaxos directed. "Move slowly, with intention." Alex raised his hands, hesitating only briefly before placing them gently on either side of Lyra's torso, just below where a human's collarbones would be. He could feel a steady vibration beneath his palms, a rhythm like a heartbeat but more complex, with multiple overlapping pulses. Lyra raised her own hands, resting them lightly on Alex's shoulders. Then, with a fluid grace, she leaned forward until their foreheads nearly touched, and her neural filaments extended to wrap gently around the back of his neck and skull. The sensation was unlike anything Alex had experienced, warm, tingling, as if each filament carried a mild electrical current that stimulated his nerve endings without discomfort. "Now, breathe together," Thaxos instructed, his voice taking on a rhythmic cadence. "Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. Establish the shared rhythm." They followed his guidance, their breathing synchronizing easily after days of unconsciously mimicking each other's patterns. With each cycle, Alex felt a growing warmth where their bodies connected, a pleasant humming sensation that spread outward from those points of contact. "Focus on the connection between you," Thaxos continued. "Not as separate beings, but as complementary aspects of a single bioenergetic system. The boundaries between you are constructs, illusory divisions that can be dissolved through conscious intent." Alex closed his eyes, concentrating on the sensations flowing through him. He could feel Lyra's presence, not just physically, but on some deeper level that defied his understanding of biology or physics. It was as if she existed as a pattern of energy that overlapped with his own, distinct but increasingly harmonized. "The station lives through you," Thaxos intoned. "Its systems are extensions of your shared consciousness. Sense its pain, its struggle against the invading pathogen. Draw that awareness into your synchronization." As if responding to the elder's words, Alex's perception suddenly expanded. He could feel the bioreactor above them, its labored functioning, the creeping darkness of the pathogen as it corrupted cell after cell. Beyond that, he sensed the wider station, corridors of living tissue, environmentally responsive membranes, the intricate network of bioluminescent organisms that provided light and monitored air quality. And through it all, the spreading infection, like ink in water, turning vibrant life to decay with terrifying efficiency. "The synchronization is beginning," one of the medical technicians reported, their voice seeming to come from very far away. "Cellular resonance patterns are aligning." Alex barely heard them. His attention was focused entirely on Lyra, or rather, on the increasingly blurred distinction between himself and Lyra. The patterns of light beneath his skin now pulsed in perfect unison with hers, creating complex, fractal designs that flowed seamlessly between their bodies. Her neural filaments had tightened slightly around his skull, the tingling sensation intensifying to a pleasant buzz that seemed to penetrate directly into his brain. "You are witnessing each other's essence," Thaxos said, his voice seeming to echo inside Alex's mind rather than reaching his ears. "The unique pattern of energy and information that constitutes your being. In a harmony oath, these patterns interweave, creating a composite that is greater than the sum of its parts." Alex felt it happening, a gentle unfurling of something deep within him, opening like a flower to the sun of Lyra's presence. Memories, emotions, sensory experiences he had never shared with anyone began to flow outward, met halfway by a corresponding stream from Lyra. Not words or images, but raw experience, untranslated and unfiltered. He experienced the wonder of her childhood on a Zaltran colony world, the unique perception of her multifaceted vision that could see spectrums of light invisible to human eyes, the deep connection to living systems that was the birthright of her species. Concepts that had no equivalent in human language bloomed in his mind, expanding his understanding in ways he could never have imagined. And in return, he felt her experiencing his memories. The simple joys of earth rain on skin, the complex social dynamics of human relationships, the particular satisfaction of solving a mechanical problem with one's hands. Things he had taken for granted his entire life, she experienced as revelations. "The synchronization is accelerating," the medical technician reported, their voice tight with concern. "Bioenergetic fields are merging faster than anticipated. Stand ready with the stabilization protocols," Thaxos ordered, "but do not interfere unless absolutely necessary." They must complete the process. Alex was only dimly aware of the conversation. The merging had progressed beyond the exchange of memories and sensory experiences to something more fundamental, a reconfiguration at the cellular level that sent waves of intense sensation throughout his body. Not pain, exactly, but a profound discomfort like growing pains magnified 1,000-fold, as if his very atoms were being rearranged. Through their rapidly deepening connection, he could feel Lyra experiencing similar sensations, her alien physiology adapting to accommodate aspects of his human biology. The patterns of light that had decorated their skin now penetrated deeper, illuminating veins, organs, and neural pathways with an ethereal glow visible even through closed eyelids. Critical threshold approaching, the technician warned. Vital signs are becoming erratic. Alex felt his heartbeat stuttering, struggling to find a rhythm that could accommodate the transformed state of his body. Lyra's multiple cardiac nodes were similarly affected, their normal synchronous pulsing fragmented and chaotic. For a moment, fear spiked through both of them, the primal terror of biological systems in distress. Then, with startling suddenness, a new rhythm emerged. Not human, not Zaltaran, but something unique that incorporated elements of both. Their hearts, his singular organ, her distributed nodes, found a shared cadence that stabilized their circulatory systems. Their breath, which had grown ragged during the transition, smoothed into a steady pattern. The discomfort of cellular reconfiguration subsided, replaced by a profound sense of rightness, of completion. Synchronization complete, the technician announced, their voice colored by disbelief. Bioenergetic fields fully merged. Now, Thaxos commanded, direct your unified field toward the bioreactor. Visualize the pathogen as darkness, and your combined energy as light that disperses it. Alex and Lyra, no longer fully separate consciousnesses but a curious amalgamation of both, turned their attention to the failing organ above them. Through their merged perception, they could see the pathogen with extraordinary clarity, its artificially engineered structure an affront to the natural order of the station's biology. Together, they extended their combined awareness into the bioreactor, allowing the unique frequency of their synchronized bioenergetic field to permeate the infected tissue. Where their energy touched, the pathogen recoiled, its molecular structure destabilizing in the presence of a biological pattern it had not been designed to combat. Slowly at first, then with gathering momentum, waves of revitalization spread through the bioreactor. Darkened tissue lightened, returning to healthy hues of pink and amber. Erratic pulsations steadied, finding the new rhythm established by the synchronized pair below. Bioluminescence rekindled, soft at first but growing stronger with each passing moment. It's working, someone gasped. The pathogen is being neutralized. The synchronized consciousness that was Alex and Lyra pushed further, extending their influence beyond the bioreactor to the wider biological systems of the station. Corridors of living tissue that had begun to wither were refreshed with new vitality. Bioluminescent organisms flared with renewed brightness. Environmental regulation systems reset to optimal functioning. The effort was tremendous, drawing deeply on their merged resources. Exhaustion began to set in, a bone-deep weariness that threatened to collapse their synchronization before the task was complete. They could feel Thaxos's concern, his readiness to end the procedure rather than risk their well-being. But they were so close. The pathogen had been reduced to isolated pockets, its artificial structure breaking down under the sustained assault of their unified field. With a final surge of effort, they directed all their remaining energy toward these last strongholds, visualizing a pulse of purifying light that would eradicate every trace of the infection. The station responded with a surge of its own, a wave of bioluminescence that cascaded through every living system, from the massive bioreactor to the smallest cleansing organisms. The light built to an almost blinding intensity, then slowly faded to a steady, healthy glow that signaled the return of normal function. Pathogen neutralized, the technician confirmed, their voice breaking with emotion. Bioreactor function returning to normal parameters. Station-wide systems stabilizing. A ragged cheer went up from the assembled team, but Alex and Lyra barely heard it. The tremendous effort had depleted their reserves, and the carefully guided synchronization was beginning to unravel under the strain. Their merged consciousness, so clear and unified moments before, began to separate into distinct entities once more. The sensation was disorienting, like waking suddenly from a vivid dream. Alex felt himself becoming just Alex again, the extraordinary expanded awareness receding like an outgoing tide. Yet something remained, a deep understanding of Lyra that transcended language, a connection that persisted even as their consciousnesses disentangled. Their bodies, too, began to separate from the intimate contact of the synchronization. Lyra's neural filaments unwound from around his skull, returning to their normal position, framing her face. Alex's hands, which had been pressed against her thoracic junction, fell away as weakness overtook him. They swayed together, exhaustion threatening to collapse them both. Medical personnel rushed forward, supporting them as their legs gave way. Alex had a brief impression of concerned faces, of monitoring equipment beeping urgently, of Thaxos issuing rapid instructions in Zaltaran. Then darkness claimed him, a deep unconsciousness that offered blessed relief from the overwhelming experience of the past hour. Alex woke to the gentle sound of flowing water and the soft glow of bioluminescent light. For a moment, he was disoriented, unsure of where he was or how much time had passed. The room around him appeared to be a medical facility of some kind, but unlike the sterile, mechanical environments of human hospitals, this space was alive. Walls that breathed gently, lighting that adjusted to his awakening, plants that turned their leaves toward him as he stirred. "Welcome back," said a familiar voice. Alex turned his head to find Elder Thaxos seated beside his bed, the elder's neural filaments arranged in what Alex now recognized as an expression of quiet satisfaction. "How long was I out?" Alex asked, his voice rough from disuse. 3 days, Thaxos replied. "Your body required time to stabilize after the synchronization. The changes were more extensive than anticipated." "Changes?" Alex pushed himself up to a sitting position, suddenly alert. He looked down at his arms and was startled to see faint patterns beneath his skin, not the temporary luminescence of the bond, but permanent markings like subtle, silvery tattoos that traced the pathways of his veins and nerves. "A side effect of the accelerated synchronization," Thaxos explained. "Your cellular structure has been permanently altered at the quantum level. Not enough to compromise your human physiology, but enough to create a lasting marker of the bond." "And Lyra?" Alex asked, immediately aware of a subtle presence in the back of his mind. Not the full consciousness sharing of their synchronization, but a gentle awareness of another's existence, like knowing someone is in the next room without seeing or hearing them. "She experienced similar alterations," Thaxos said. "Her recovery was somewhat faster, given that her biology was already adapted to integration with external systems. She has been waiting for you to awaken." As if summoned by her name, the door to the medical chamber dilated open, and Lyra entered. The sight of her sent a surge of emotion through Alex. Not just his own feelings, but an echo of hers, transmitted through the attenuated bond that still connected them. Relief, joy, concern, and something deeper that neither of them had yet named. "You're awake," she said simply, her multifaceted eyes catching the light as she approached his bedside. Alex nodded, taking in the changes in her appearance. Like him, she bore permanent markers of their synchronization, the patterns beneath her skin now incorporating subtle elements that reminded him of human circulatory systems, and her neural filaments seeming somehow more controlled, less autonomously reactive than before. "The station?" he asked. "Fully recovered," she replied. "The pathogen was completely neutralized, and the bioreactor is functioning at optimal capacity. Your Earth Central Command has been informed of your role in saving the station. They are impressed." There was a hint of amusement in her voice that told Alex there was more to the story than she was saying. And probably completely confused about how their maintenance technician ended up biologically bonded to an alien botanist, he added with a weak smile. Indeed, Thaxos confirmed, rising from his seat. Which brings us to the matter at hand. Now that you have both recovered, decisions must be made. Alex felt a flutter of anxiety that was not entirely his own. Through their bond, he sensed Lyra's apprehension about what was to come. Earth Central wants me back, I assume, Alex said. They have requested your return once you are medically cleared, Thaxos acknowledged. However, I have informed them of certain complications. The bond, Alex guessed. It's permanent now, isn't it? Even with the desynchronization ritual. Not permanent in its current form, Thaxos clarified. The deep merger you experienced has naturally receded to a more sustainable connection. The desynchronization ritual could still sever that remaining link, though it would not reverse the cellular changes you have both undergone. But we would no longer have to stay within 50 meters of each other, Alex said, trying to understand the implications. Correct, Thaxos confirmed. You would be free to return to your separate lives, with only the physical markers and perhaps some residual sensitivity to each other's presence remaining. The elder's tone suggested there was more he wasn't saying, and Alex felt a ripple of unease through his connection with Lyra. What are you telling us? He asked directly. Thaxos sighed, a sound like wind through crystal chimes. The synchronization you achieved was unprecedented. The depth of merger, the complete harmony of disparate biological systems, the efficacy against the pathogen, all far beyond what our scientists predicted possible. Some on the council believe it would be wasteful to sever such a unique bond. Wasteful, Alex repeated flatly, because we might be useful against future pathogens? We're not a biological weapon, Elder. Of course not, Thaxos said quickly. But you are a breakthrough in interspecies harmonization that could have profound implications for future cooperation between humans and Zalterans. There are those who would offer significant incentive for you to maintain the bond and allow further study. And if we choose the desynchronization instead? Lyra asked, her voice steady but with an undercurrent of tension. Then that choice will be respected, Thaxos assured them. The ritual can be arranged within days. I merely present all options before leaving you to discuss this privately. With that, the elder rose and moved toward the door. Before exiting, he turned back to them. For what it is worth, few beings ever experience the level of connection you share during the synchronization. There is wisdom to be found in such experiences, regardless of the path you choose. The door sealed behind him, leaving Alex and Lyra alone in the gently pulsing chamber. For a long moment, neither spoke. The bond between them hummed with complex emotions, uncertainty, confusion, fear, and beneath it all, a reluctance to lose the connection they had shared. So, Alex finally said, "We have options." Lyra moved to sit on the edge of his bed, her neural filaments shifting in patterns that reflected her thoughtfulness. "We do. Return to our separate lives or explore this unexpected path. I never planned to stay on Xylar Station," Alex said, stating the obvious. "My life, my career, my future, they were all on Earth or human colonies. And my work, my community, my purpose are here," Lyra acknowledged. "Our worlds are very different." Yet even as they spoke the words, both could feel the inadequacy of such simple divisions after what they had experienced. During their synchronization, they had shared not just thoughts or memories, but entire frameworks of perception, altering how each understood reality itself. But it wasn't horrible, was it? Alex asked softly. Being connected like that. Lyra's multifaceted eyes met his. "No," she admitted. "It was extraordinary, frightening in its intensity, but also beautiful in ways I lack words to describe. I didn't expect to find so much common ground between us," Alex said. "When we first met, you seemed so alien, so incomprehensibly different. But at the core, beneath all the biological and cultural differences, we are not so different," she finished for him. "Conscious beings seeking understanding, connection, purpose." They fell silent again, but the silence was comfortable now, filled with the gentle awareness of each other's presence through their attenuated bond. Alex found himself focusing on that connection, the subtle sense of Lyra that remained even when he closed his eyes. It was nothing like the overwhelming merger they had experienced in the bioreactor chamber, but it had a quiet intimacy that he realized he would miss profoundly if it were gone. Earth Central has offered me a new position, he said after a while. Director of Xenobiological Integration Technologies. Apparently saving a major trade hub from destruction looks good on a resume. Lyra made a sound that Alex now recognized as laughter. The Science Council has made a similar offer to me. Lead researcher for human Zaltaran biological synchronization studies. So they're both trying to capitalize on what happened, Alex observed, unsurprised. It would appear so, Lyra agreed. Though the positions themselves are not without merit. There is much to be learned from our experience, much that could benefit both our peoples. And they both require us to maintain the bond, Alex guessed, to continue studying its effects and potential applications. Lyra nodded. The positions would also require regular contact between Xylar Station and Earth Central. Diplomatic shuttles make the journey twice monthly. Alex considered this, feeling the possibilities unfold in his mind. So we wouldn't have to choose completely. We could share time between our worlds. It would be an adjustment, Lyra cautioned. Neither of us fully belongs in the other's environment. There would be challenges, misunderstandings, difficulties. Like you finding my food disgusting and me thinking your music sounds like a headache? Alex suggested with a smile. Lyra's neural filaments rippled in amusement. Precisely. Though I have developed a curious appreciation for your pasta since our tasting experiment. And I've started to hear patterns in Zaltaran harmonics that don't make me want to run away screaming, Alex admitted. They looked at each other, the bond between them warm with growing certainty. It wasn't a decision made from obligation or necessity now, but from genuine choice, a recognition of the unique connection they had formed, unexpected and unplanned, but valuable nonetheless. So we try, Alex said simply, not because a cultural misunderstanding forced us together, or because we saved the station together, but because I want to see where this goes. Whatever this is, as do I, Lyra agreed, her skin patterns brightening with emotion. We have already transformed each other in ways neither of us anticipated. Perhaps that is just the beginning. The weeks that followed brought rapid changes. Xylar Station, restored to full health, buzzed with renewed activity as trade resumed and visitors returned. The story of the station's salvation spread throughout the sector, growing more elaborate with each retelling, until Alex and Lyra found themselves the subjects of considerable curiosity and occasionally unwelcome attention. Their new positions provided both purpose and flexibility. Alex divided his time between Earth Central, where he helped integrate elements of Zaltaran biotechnology into human systems, and Xylar Station, where he served as the primary human consultant on technological compatibility issues. Lyra similarly split her focus between her botanical research on the station and regular visits to Earth, where she studied human biological responses to Zaltaran environments. The arrangement wasn't without its challenges. Earth's atmosphere and gravity required Lyra to wear a specially designed support suit during her visits, and certain human environments, particularly crowded urban centers with their noise and pollution, overwhelmed her sensitive neural filaments. Similarly, Alex still found aspects of Zaltaran culture bewildering and occasionally triggered minor diplomatic incidents through misunderstandings of social protocols. But the bond between them, rather than fading with time, grew more nuanced and complex. The permanent marks on their skin occasionally shifted in response to strong emotions or proximity to each other, becoming a visible language that both learned to read with increasing fluency. The awareness of each other's presence expanded to include subtle emotional states and even, during moments of particular harmony, flashes of shared perception across vast distances. 6 months after the synchronization, they stood together in the same respiratory garden where they had first met. The station had long since recovered from the pathogen attack, and the garden flourished with renewed vitality, plants that had nearly died now thriving with exuberant growth. It looks different now, Alex observed, running his hand along a frond that curled gently toward his touch in recognition. Or maybe I'm seeing it differently. Both, perhaps, Lyra suggested. Her neural filaments drifted freely in the garden's gentle currents, occasionally brushing against nearby plants in what Alex now understood was a form of communication. The garden has evolved, and so have we. Alex nodded, looking down at the silvery patterns on his arms that pulsed softly in response to his proximity to Lyra. Earth Central xenobiologists were still studying the changes in his physiology, fascinated by how his human cellular structure had partially adapted to Zaltaran bioenergetic patterns without compromising his fundamental biology. You know, he said, I never did properly apologize for that first day. Blundering in here, making inappropriate comments about your hair. Lyra's multifaceted eyes caught the light as she turned toward him, amusement evident in the patterns beneath her skin. Perhaps it was not such an inappropriate comment after all. Merely premature. Still the worst pickup line in the history of interspecies relations, Alex insisted with a smile. And yet, surprisingly effective, Lyra countered, her neural filaments extending to brush gently against his cheek in what had become a familiar gesture of affection. The contact sent a pleasant warmth through their bond, a reminder of the deeper connection they now shared. I've been thinking, Alex said, catching one of her filaments gently between his fingers, a liberty that would have been shocking to Zaltaran observers months ago, but had become natural between them. Maybe it wasn't just bad luck or cosmic coincidence that brought us together. Maybe there was something in us, some compatibility that existed before we ever met, that made the bond possible. A philosophical question, Lyra observed. Were we drawn together because we were compatible, or did we become compatible because we were drawn together? Both, maybe, Alex suggested. A feedback loop of connection and transformation. He paused, suddenly aware of a shift in her emotional state through their bond, a flutter of anticipation and nervous energy. What is it? He asked. Lyra's skin patterns rippled with complex emotions. I have been invited to lead an expedition to a newly discovered world in the Myriad Cluster. The planet exhibits unique botanical characteristics that may represent an evolutionary link between Zaltaran and human plant species. The research opportunity is significant. That's amazing, Alex said sincerely, feeling her excitement through their bond. When would you leave? In 3 standard months, she answered. The expedition would last approximately 1 Earth year. That's a long time, Alex said, a sudden emptiness opening in his chest at the thought of such an extended separation. Through their bond, he knew she felt it too. Yes, she acknowledged. It would require us to be apart far beyond the 50-meter proximity that was once necessary. The bond has stabilized enough that physical distance no longer causes physiological distress, but we'd still feel the separation, Alex finished for her. They had discovered that while their bond no longer enforced proximity, distance did attenuate the connection between them. During Lyra's shorter trips to Earth or Alex's returns to human space, they had both experienced a sense of muted awareness, like trying to hear a familiar voice through increasingly thick walls. I have not yet accepted the position, Lyra said, her neural filaments curling inward in what Alex now recognized as her expression of internal conflict. The research is important, but our bond is unique, precious. Alex took her hands in his, feeling the subtle difference in temperature and texture that had become so familiar. Is this the kind of opportunity that comes once in a lifetime? Lyra's multifaceted eyes met his. It is significant. The botanical systems on this world could revolutionize our understanding of convergent evolution between our species. Then you should go, Alex said, the words difficult but sincere. We've been letting this bond guide us from the beginning, seeing where it leads. Maybe this is the next step. And you? Lyra asked, her concern flowing through their connection. What would you do while I am gone? Alex had been considering this question himself over recent weeks, uncertain of his path forward. Earth Central has offered me a position on the Jupiter Development Project. They're integrating Zaltaran bioadaptive systems into the atmospheric processing stations. It would keep me busy, and it's important work. On Jupiter, Lyra repeated. nearly as far from the Myriad cluster as possible. Yeah, Alex admitted. Not ideal for weekend visits. They stood in silence for a moment, the garden around them responding subtly to their emotional states, flowers closing slightly in response to their mixed feelings. Perhaps, Lyra said carefully, this is an opportunity to discover what our bond truly means. Not a forced proximity by accidental oath, nor a desperate collaboration to save lives, but a chosen connection maintained across vast distances. A test, Alex suggested. An evolution, Lyra countered. All living systems must adapt to new conditions or stagnate. Through their bond, Alex could sense her genuine belief in this perspective, her Zaltran understanding of life as a constant process of growth and change. It was one of the many ways her alien viewpoint had expanded his own thinking over the months they had been connected. Then we'll evolve, he agreed, drawing her closer. And when your expedition is complete, we'll see what our bond has become. The year of separation was both more difficult and more revealing than either had anticipated. The vast distance between Jupiter's orbital stations and the remote world in the Myriad cluster stretched their bond to its limits. The constant awareness of each other's presence faded to occasional pulses of connection, brief moments of shared emotion or sensation that came unpredictably, often during sleep or moments of deep focus. Yet these intermittent connections took on profound significance, each one a reminder of the bond that persisted despite the physical separation. They discovered that strong emotions could bridge the gap more effectively than routine thoughts, leading to unexpected moments of connection during both crises and celebrations. When Alex's engineering team successfully activated the first large-scale bioadaptive system in Jupiter's upper atmosphere, the surge of triumph and satisfaction momentarily strengthened his bond with Lyra, allowing her to briefly share in his achievement. Similarly, when Lyra's expedition uncovered a grove of plants whose cellular structure showed remarkable similarities to both Zaltaran and Earth species, Alex experienced a flash of her wonder and excitement across the vast interstellar gulf. Their separate journeys also brought individual growth. Alex became more confident in navigating Zaltaran biological systems without Lyra's guidance, developing an intuitive understanding that his colleagues attributed to his unique cellular modifications, but that he knew came from months of shared consciousness with Lyra. Meanwhile, Lyra found herself approaching scientific problems with a hybrid methodology that incorporated human analytical frameworks alongside Zaltaran intuitive processes, leading to breakthroughs that surprised her expedition team. Their work brought recognition from both species. Alex was appointed as the first human representative to the Zaltaran Biological Integration Council, while Lyra received an honorary position at Earth's premier Xenobotanical Research Institute. Their bond, once a diplomatic incident and then a desperate solution to crisis, had become a symbol of successful interspecies collaboration. When a year finally drew to a close, they arranged to meet where it had all begun, the respiratory garden on Xylar Station. Alex arrived first, having completed his assignment on Jupiter 2 weeks earlier. As he waited, he found himself nervously monitoring their bond, which had grown stronger as the physical distance between them decreased but still felt different than it had before their separation. The garden had changed during their absence, its plants more vibrant and varied, new species integrated alongside familiar ones. Alex recognized Lyra's influence in some of the new arrangements, her distinctive approach to botanical harmony evident in the way certain species complemented each other. He sensed her presence before he saw her, a sudden clarity in their bond, like clearing fog from a window. Turning toward the garden entrance, he felt his breath catch at the sight of her. Lyra stood framed in the doorway, her form both achingly familiar and subtly changed. The patterns beneath her skin had evolved, incorporating new configurations that reminded Alex of Jupiter's swirling cloud patterns. Her neural filaments had grown longer, now reaching nearly to her waist, their silver-white color interspersed with strands of blue that caught the light as they moved. "Hello, Alex," she said, her voice carrying the musical quality he had missed so deeply. "Lyra," he replied, his own voice unsteady with emotion. Neither moved for a moment, each taking in the changes in the other. Through their bond, Alex could feel her assessment of his appearance, noting the new silver streaks in his hair, a side effect of long-term exposure to the modified atmosphere on Jupiter. The deeper embedding of the luminescent patterns in his skin, the subtle changes in his posture and movement that reflected a year of working in variable gravity conditions. Then the moment broke, and they moved toward each other. Lyra's neural filaments reached for him even before she was close enough to touch, extending across the space between them in an eager greeting. As they made contact, their bond flared with renewed vigor, a rush of shared sensation and emotion that nearly overwhelmed them both. "I missed you," Alex said simply, words inadequate for the complex reality of their connection, but necessary nonetheless. "And I you," Lyra replied, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the garden's bioluminescence. The bond remained, but it was like seeing you through a translucent membrane, present but not fully clear. "Was it worth it?" he asked. "Your expedition, the discoveries." Lyra's skin patterns shifted in a complex expression that Alex recognized as thoughtful satisfaction. "Scientifically, yes. We documented 17 previously unknown botanical species with hybrid characteristics. 3 show particular promise for medical applications." She paused, her neural filaments curling slightly. "But I found myself comparing every discovery to the wonder of our bond. Nothing quite matched it." "I know what you mean," Alex said. Jupiter was incredible, watching the atmosphere processors transform the cloud layers, integrating Zaltran biotech with human engineering. But it always felt like there was something missing. Someone missing. Through their bond, they shared the deeper truth beneath the words. How the year apart had confirmed what both had suspected, but neither had fully acknowledged before their separation. The bond between them was no longer merely a biological curiosity or the result of an accidental oath, but something they had chosen and nurtured, something that had become essential to both. "I've been offered a permanent position with the Jupiter Project," Alex said, "leading the next phase of development. And I'm guessing there are offers waiting for you after the success of your expedition." Lyra nodded. "The Science Council has proposed I lead a new research division focusing on cross-species botanical integration. The work would be based here on Xylar Station." "So we're back where we started," Alex observed, "facing a choice between separate worlds." "Perhaps," Lyra said, her tone thoughtful. "Or perhaps we have been solving the wrong problem." She reached out, her slender fingers tracing the luminescent patterns on his forearm. Where she touched, the patterns brightened, responding to her biological signature in a way that still fascinated xenobiologists from both species. "We have been trying to fit our bond into existing structures," she continued. "Your work or mine, your world or mine. But what we share is something new, something that has never existed before. Perhaps it requires a new framework." "What are you suggesting?" Alex asked, though he could sense the shape of her thoughts through their connection. "A joint initiative," Lyra proposed. "A collaborative project between human and Zaltran scientists, focused on the applications of our unique bond. Not as subjects to be studied, but as pioneers leading the research ourselves." Alex considered the idea, feeling its potential unfold in his mind. "You mean establishing a new research program specifically for biological integration between our species? Using what we've learned from our bond as a foundation?" "Precisely," Lyra confirmed. "The station administrator has already expressed interest in hosting such an initiative. It would provide a legitimate framework for us to remain together while continuing the work that matters to both of us." "Together," Alex repeated, the word carrying weight beyond its simple meaning. "Not because we accidentally triggered some ancient biological oath, or because we had to save a station, or because our respective governments found us scientifically interesting, but because we choose it," Lyra finished. "Because what we have discovered together is worth pursuing further." Through their bond, Alex could feel her certainty, her commitment to the path she was proposing. More than that, He could feel the emotion behind it, a complex blend of respect, affection, and something deeper that transcended simple human or Zaltaran categorization. I think, he said slowly, that continuing to explore this bond is the most interesting research opportunity either of us is likely to find. Lyra's skin patterns brightened with pleasure, the light pulsing in a rhythm that matched the quickening of Alex's own heartbeat. Is that a yes, Technician Alex? He smiled at the formal title, a callback to their first awkward interactions. It's a yes, botanical geneticist Lyra, though I expect better accommodations than last time. That semi-sentient mattress in the diplomatic quarters kept trying to envelop me in my sleep. Her neural filaments rippled with amusement. I believe that was its attempt at providing comfort. But yes, more suitable arrangements can be made. As they stood together in the garden where their journey had begun, Alex was struck by the improbable path that had brought them to this moment. From a cultural misunderstanding to a forced proximity, from a desperate collaboration to save lives to a year of growth apart, and now to a chosen future together. You know, he said, taking her hand in his, the patterns on their skin brightening where they touched. I'm starting to think that complimenting your hair was the best mistake I ever made. Lyra's multifaceted eyes crinkled at the corners in what Alex now recognized as her version of a smile. Perhaps it was not a mistake at all, but the universe's rather unsubtle way of bringing together two beings who might otherwise never have truly seen each other. The universe has a weird sense of humor, then, Alex replied. Indeed, Lyra agreed, her neural filaments reaching up to gently brush his cheek in the gesture that had become their own unique form of affection. Though I must admit, I have developed quite an appreciation for yours. Around them, the garden responded to their emotions, flowers opening and bioluminescent fungi brightening in harmony with the strengthened bond between them. It was, Alex thought, a fitting metaphor for what they had created together. Something unique, unexpected, and beautiful, grown from the most unlikely of beginnings. So, he said, ready to show the universe what happens when a human maintenance technician and a Zaltaran botanical geneticist decide to rewrite the rules of interspecies relations. I believe we already have, Lyra replied, the patterns beneath her skin pulsing with light that matched the rhythm of his heart. But I look forward to continuing the experiment. And as they left the garden together, the luminescent patterns on their skin glowing in matched harmony, Alex reflected that of all the maintenance jobs he'd been assigned in his career, this one, fixing a simple communication node on an alien station, had certainly turned out to be the most unexpectedly life-changing. One careless compliment, one unexpected reaction, and the universe had never been the same for either of them, which just went to show, he thought with amusement that flowed through their bond and brought an answering ripple of light to Lyra's skin, that you should always be careful what you say about an alien's hair. You never know where it might lead.